In 2018, I got to my first non-American park. Then, in 2023, I made my first trip overseas. 5 months later, I did another one, and all of a sudden, I've been to 19 around the world. With Japan just about a year away, this might be a good time to look at where I've been and rank them up. These are all the parks I've been to outside the US, from worst to best. I want to keep this to a top 15, so I'm going to leave out these 4 parks and explain why. One of them is Tivoli Frieden in Denmark. This is a family park, not really catered to enthusiasts. When we went, they had a spinning mouse, an SBF spinner, and a wacky worm. And honestly, we may have not even gone if it hadn't been for the SCAD tower. Now, they have a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, which would have been really nice, but still, it was a very aesthetic park, a nice place to see and pick up some credits, but not really fair to rank up. We only visited Skara Summerland, Sweden for about an hour. We weren't planning on doing much here, but everyone wanted to ride Tranen, the one and only SNS Freefly. But that had major maintenance problems and they couldn't get it open, so we rode the Maurer spinner called Spinner. We didn't get a chance to ride the powered coaster. Some people rode one of the flats and we were out of there. Kind of a tough park to rank up. Cultus Lake in Canada is a very nice little park, but it's 100% meant for families. They have a Zamperla Junior coaster called Runaway Mine Train. That was custom made and a very decent ride. They have one other coaster, Blast and Barrels, and SBF Visa. The whole thing is like one of those mini parks on Roller Coaster Tycoon. Small plot, a bunch of flat rides, very crammed, but is a very pretty park. Again, a nice park to see. Pick up a couple credits on my way to P&E Playland, but not a park catered to a guy like me. Last one, Farup Summerland is absolutely a park people want to hit when they're in Denmark, but I happened to go during a major storm. It was freezing in the middle of August, 40-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. That shut down every big ride and we were left with the small ones. Honestly, I'm surprised we got to ride anything at all, but we got 5 credits, played mini golf a lot, checked out the playground equipment, did the obstacle course and a funhouse, so we made the best of a bad day. I'd love to come back and ride Phoenix and Lynette and Falcon and give this park a fair shake, but I can't do that right now. Number 15, P&E Playland, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I got here in 2019 during the week, and it was insanely crowded. There was hardly anywhere to park. There was no shade in line for coaster, and they had it on one train. These are all points against the park, but it was on my bucket list for a long time because of coaster. One of the most insane wooden coasters in the world, and despite 40+ minute waits and getting baked in the hot Canada sun, I got 3 rides and it lived up to the hype. They're opening a new coaster this year. Thunderbolt is an intimate relocation of Italy's Senza Fiato, overhauled by Zamperla, and using an LSM launch with new trains. When I went, Corkscrew was still there, the infamous Final Destination coaster, standing but not operating. Therefore, I only got rides on their E&F Miler Kids coaster and their SBF spinner. I also got to ride their drop tower and their Ferris wheel, and they have a very popular KMG pendulum called the Beast, but that was down when I was there. Coaster made this park fun, but it feels like a fairground and it wasn't operating all that great. Thunderbolt should make this park a lot more legit. Number 14, Marineland, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. This park gets a ton of hate. There's a lot out there about the way they treat animals. It's not something I've looked into, but I know it's a sticky subject for the park's critics. Anyway, I went here for 2 reasons. 1, to see the mass of wide open space, and 2, to ride one of the world's weirdest coasters, Dragon Mountain. Neither disappointed. Yes, it's a mile or more from the front of the park to the back where Dragon Mountain is. And yes, you could land an airplane on those footpaths and have plenty of room to spare. It was cool to see the first time. Not sure if I'd enjoy doing that all the time. Dragon Mountain is one of my all-time favorite aero coasters now. Super long, pretty smooth, and lived up to the weird hype with a bizarre terrain layout. I also knew they had a very good drop tower, but didn't expect it to be my favorite of all time, taking place on top of a very big hill, then launching up 300 feet, holding you at the top, and then dropping down, getting an awesome view of Niagara Falls from up there. We also saw their marine life show, and that was very good. Very SeaWorld-esque. So we had fun at the park, but it was 90% walking and 10% riding or watching, so I gotta put it lower on here. Number 13, Bonbon Land, Holm Alstrup, Denmark. This park is all about the shock factor. Dog farts, bird poop, little bags of poop candy, queasy animals, this drop tower that jolts you forward before dropping you. They definitely have found their niche. This place has 4 coasters, their worst one being their most famous, Hundepruten. More commonly known, the dog fart coaster, a very basic zero family coaster, but I was very impressed with both Gerstlauers. Vild's Finette was the first ever coaster to go beyond vertical, dating back to 2003, and I had low expectations. I just assumed this was going to be crazy rough. It was actually great. Then there was Han Cotton, the spinner, and when we got the weight distribution thrown off, it became the greatest spinning coaster I've ever been on. They also have a Zero called Victor Van Dorm, one of those 20-car family coasters that sprawled all over the place. Really cool ride, albeit slow. They have a log flume themed to cheese called the Water Rat, a good Fabry drop tower, a Zamperla disco, a river rafting ride. All around, a park that you could spend a full day in, see everything, and leave satisfied. Number 12. SeaWorld, Surfer's Paradise, Queensland, Australia. Earlier this year, I got to visit the Village Roadshow version of SeaWorld, and it wasn't bad at all. It was far and away the hottest day I spent in Australia, so I had to deal with that. And some of those lines got insanely hot, especially SpongeBob's Boating School Blast, a Zamperla gravity coaster. That's what I get for getting a kiddie credit. And Storm Coaster, the Mock Rides water coaster. That indoor queue was so crazy hot I thought I was gonna pass out. Those rides were just okay. I was a bit disappointed in Jet Rescue, their Intamin Launch Family Straddle coaster. That was so short and not as snappy as I was expecting. But the main reason to come to SeaWorld is Leviathan, their new Gravity Group wooden coaster. And let me first point out that it was only a year old when I rode it, and already it was pretty jarringly rough. That's a theme with the Gravity Group, something you don't see with GCI, at least not this fast. Despite that, it exceeded my expectations. It shot up to my number 2 coaster in Australia, and I paid to ride it backwards, and that was absolutely worth it. We also caught a marine show, which again was very good. There didn't seem to be a great flat ride selection here. We just skipped them. I chose to explore the park a bit and take in the rest of what the park had to offer. It is the weakest Australian park, but by no means is it bad. Number 11. Bakken, Klampenborg, Denmark. My first European park was also the oldest park in the world, and right off the bat, I had a nice dose of culture shock. The lack of clearances, the lack of barriers, some of the imagery you would never see in America. It was definitely a trip. Tornado is their main coaster here, the Intamin spinning coaster. Supposedly, one of the craziest in the world, especially if the ride ops activate boost mode. Basically, they spin the car manually and jack up the lift speed. They didn't do this for me either time, despite us asking. And even though it was a fun ride, it wasn't as crazy as I was expecting. The big surprise was another Intamin, Mine Train Ulven. That was one of the most intense mine trains I've ever ridden. They have 3 other coasters, Rushabanen being the 1932 wooden coaster, Wildemoose, the Mock Rides Wild Mouse, and Marihonen, the Zero Kids coaster. Those were all just okay. We rode some of the dark rides, didn't hit the flats, but they had some interesting ones. And the whole time, I'm just taking in my first European park and marveling at this place that's been open since 1583. That doesn't even sound like a real year, but here it is, still going strong 441 years later. Number 10, Luna Park, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. This park is an icon of Sydney, opening in 1935, right under the Harbour Bridge, across the bay from the Sydney Opera House. It's just woven into the city, and you walk in and either buy an all-day wristband or pay per ride. When we went, the park had 3 coasters. The wooden Wild Mouse was torn down for refurbishment. That's a rare model, and it's too bad I missed out. So I rode the other 3. Little Nipper, a Preston and Barbieri kids coaster. Boomerang, a Gerstlauer family boomerang, and that was pretty solid. And then, the first of its kind Intamin hot racer, Big Dipper. This is like a launched RMC Raptor, and I thought it would be on the mild side, but it wasn't. It was pretty crazy. I definitely underestimated it. The park is small, but it looks great. You can ride the Ferris wheel to get a view of the park and all the landmarks around it. They have a great indoor funhouse type place, and you can explore the Hall of Mirrors, or go down a slide or spin around. Unlike other funhouses, you can choose what you want to do. You're not forced to go from one thing to the next. They also have a rotor for those with strong stomachs, and 2 outstanding flat rides. Hair Raiser, a Larson Drop Tower, and Sledgehammer, a Zamperla Discovery 360. One of the great pendulum rides I've been on. It would be stronger with Wild Mouse, but we enjoyed our time there. Number 9. Kolmarden, Norrköping, Sweden. This is like the Marineland of Sweden. An animal park first, and amusement park second, putting all their animal exhibits up front and making you walk all the way to the back for the rides. That distance feels about the same as Marineland. There is a kids section of the park about halfway up. There is a Zero Kids coaster there, but if you want the main event, you gotta go all the way back. And no, I'm not talking about the Vekoma Junior coaster, Delphin Expressen. I'm talking about Wildfire, the RMC Topper Track Woody, currently tied as the world's tallest wooden coaster. This looks like a world-class coaster. It didn't quite live up to the hype, but it was still a coaster I was happy to lap over and over again. It ran smooth, it had a great first half. It had a tremendous view of the water at the top, and I say it's the best zoo coaster ever. Their other big ticket ride is their Sky Ride. It takes about 30 minutes and you get to see all the animals from a bird's eye view, ending with some pretty great views of Wildfire. The park looks very well kept, the animal exhibits are good. You can tell they take pride in the park and it's got something for everyone. It's just lacking in the rides department to be higher on the list. Number 8. Djurs Sommerland, Nimtofte, Denmark. This was our first miserable weather day on our European trip, but luckily nothing was closed. We just had to put up with some weird August cold and very gusty winds. This is where I picked up my 600th credit, the Intamin Megalite Paratin, and it was good but wasn't quite what I was expecting. Again, the bad weather played a role in that. This park is loaded with coasters, 8 total, most of them being family friendly. Huvelen is technically a family ride, but that Intamin launch coaster packs a punch. Another Intamin, Dragakongen, was a huge surprise. It takes the family suspended coaster to another level. Thor's Hammer was my first Gerstlauer bobsled, and it puts other Wild Mouse coasters to shame. We also got to ride their log flume, one of the great pendulums ever, this being built by Intamin. And overall, I felt like the weather hurt our experience despite the crowds being non-existent. And I love to see this park at its full potential. It definitely has a lot of it, and I can see it through the freezing rain and gusty winds. Number 7. Tivoli Gardens, Copenhagen, Denmark. The first night of my trip to Europe was spent at this legendary park right in the heart of Copenhagen. It was a Saturday night and the park was jam-packed, and the first thing you notice is the gardens part. It's hard to tell you're even in a theme park when you enter, but as you keep walking, you start seeing the rides pop up. Demonen is their B&M floorless, very small scale and jammed into a small plot, but still manages to be mid-tier. Rusjebanen is 110 years old now, but still runs butter smooth. Even if the airtime was a bit exaggerated, riding with a brakeman in the middle was a lot of fun. They also had a power coaster and a kids coaster, a drop tower that was cool to get a good view of Copenhagen, a spinning condor which I had not seen before, a weird dark ride that's mostly underground. So, a pretty good selection of rides. Top that off with a cool setting in the middle of the city. Plus, how great the park looks from the inside. And the alive atmosphere really stands out to me looking back on the trip. That being the last nice day before the storm rolled in and made everything a ghost town for the next 4 days. If you're spending any time in Copenhagen or even have a layover, check this place out. Number 6. Gröna, Stockholm, Sweden. The last night in Europe, we got to spend at this gorgeous seaside park in Stockholm. Very small and cramped, but that added to the charm. This had a fatal accident on its jetline coaster earlier that summer, and apparently that was cutting down on attendance ever since. It was a Sunday night and wasn't too crowded. I don't recall waiting very long for anything. And of course, Jetline was standing but not operating, as was their GCI family wooden coaster, Twister, undergoing a major retrack. So, that left us with Monster, the new B&M invert and star of the park, Bildemusen, an awesome Gerstlauer bobsled, Kvasten, a solid Vekoma family suspended coaster, and Insane, the dreadful Intamin Zaxbin. Still, I was so happy to ride another one after losing Green Lantern at Magic Mountain. This park is small, so they have a bunch of drop towers, Icarus being the craziest one, taking you up 300 feet and dropping face first. Also, a really nasty flat ride that serves as nightmare fuel. These swings that go out over the water, a crazy dangerous funhouse, this tunnel of love that was just odd, and overall, it was a great way to end the European trip. It would have been better with a full coaster lineup, and they're getting one soon that looks great. So if you're in Stockholm, come to Gröna for the amazing scenery, stay for the insane rides. Well, not those insane rides. Maybe do that once or twice max. Number 5. Dreamworld, Coomera, Queensland, Australia. The last park I went to in Australia, this park had a really tragic accident in 2016 and apparently hasn't fully recovered, so I wasn't sure what to expect. It was a Saturday, but we didn't have to wait long for anything. Their main coaster being Steel Taipan, the Mock Ride's triple launch coaster, a near Bluefire clone, and it was a very solid coaster. But then, we rode the spinning bat car, and that did it for me. Definitely the best bat car experience in Australia. They have 4 other coasters, one for kids, one for families. Then you have the Aero Looper Gold Coaster and the launched Intamin Motor Coaster. Those weren't great, but they weren't bad. So really, Steel Taipan was the only outstanding coaster. But this park has a lot more to offer. Their drop tower uses the side of Tower of Terror, that coaster being torn out 5 years ago, so it's over 300 feet tall and leaves you up there for almost a minute admiring the Gold Coast before dropping you. Sky Voyager was also awesome, the first flying theater I've seen outside a Disney park. They also have a wildlife section, white tigers, koalas, kangaroos. This is a well-rounded park and that's why it cracks the top 5. And that's not even to mention their brand new Big Bear Mountain style Vekoma family coaster coming later this year, and that looks great. Number 4. Warner Bros. Movie World, Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. This was the main event of Australia, home of the best looking coasters in the country, especially because of DC Rivals Hypercoaster. This mock hyper brought all the hype and lived up to it. Amazing going forward, insane going backward, definitely worth the price of admission. Superman Escape is the Intamin accelerator, and this did not disappoint from a strong launch to an airtime-filled layout. Green Lantern even exceeded my expectations, a great forceful ride from start to finish. The only other coaster that was open was Road Runner Roller Coaster, a super smooth Vekoma Junior coaster, and it was good for what it was. I miss Scooby-Doo, the wild mouse that's getting a major overhaul, and 3 more coasters they're opening in 2024, including a brand new Wizard of Oz section. This park is lacking in good flat rides. They do have the Wild West log flume, which is extensively themed, ending with this great looking drop. It's definitely not a perfect park. It has Six Flags vibes, but it's definitely a step above. The operations definitely aren't great, but this is the park I kept wanting to come back to because of those great coasters. Number 3, Tusenfryd, Vinterbro, Norway. We went through 13 hours of overnight bus hell to get here, but we couldn't miss the biggest park in Norway, not with that coaster lineup. This is built up a giant hill, taking an escalator up to the main park. That Norwegian loop of Speed Monster greeting you as you arrive. That turned out to be a big disappointment. The intimate accelerator not living up to its brethren around the world. But their new for 2023 coaster was awesome. The launched inverted Gerstlauer, Storm the Dragon Legend. I also developed a love-hate relationship with their Vekoma Woody, Thunder Coaster, but it was mostly love. They had a few more forgettable coasters, but also had the best pendulum I've ever ridden in Spin Spider. Not the biggest or anything like that, but a long ride cycle and gave sustained airtime. We also checked out their well-themed but confusing dark ride. They had a great-looking rapids ride, and of course, they had Teeny Weeny. On its own, it wouldn't be much, but when you're traveling with 70 other coaster enthusiasts, it becomes an instant classic. The park is very good, and the experience was made better by a bunch of tired enthusiasts who spent the night in a bus and completely let their guard down. Number 2, Canada's Wonderland, Vaughan, Ontario, Canada. The biggest park in Canada, and one of the biggest parks in the world. This place has 18 coasters and some of the best flat rides you'll find in any park. I've been here twice. Each time, it was a crowded weekday, so there's no wonder why this park is one of Cedar Fair's favorites. The one problem is how top-heavy the coaster lineup is. Cedar Fair took over in 2006 and has done wonders getting some legit B&Ms in here. But there are layers of bad or boring coasters you have to work through, and I'd like to see Cedar Fair start cycling those out. After all, this park is 100% developed. Leviathan is a great B&M Giga. Behemoth is a solid B&M Hyper. Yukon Striker is the world's tallest, fastest, longest, and loopiest dive coaster. And Vortex is a very strong aero-suspended coaster. They're also getting some kind of launch coaster next year, and that'll help balance out the lineup. It's in the top tier of Cedar Fair investments, but as of now, it's in my middle tier of Cedar Fair parks. They still have a lot of work to do to make the park elite, but they are definitely working on it. Number 1, Leesburg, Gothenburg, Sweden. After a week of dreary and empty European parks, we arrived at the Grand Curiosa Hotel for a 2-day visit, and I knew this place was going to be special. This park is built up a hillside, some of the rides being built onto the hill, a giant escalator sitting in the middle to take you up and down. Both of their headline coasters were spectacular, the Mach Multi-Launch Helix being my top coaster in Europe, and the Intamin Prefab Balder being an airtime machine. But they had some really good supporting coasters also. Valkyria, the B&M Dive, and Leesburgbanen, the Zero Mine Train that circled the side of the hill. Throw in some great flats. Atmosphere, the observation tower turned drop tower. Loki, another great Intamin pendulum. Mechanica, this crazy star-shaped ride. A great dark ride called Underlanded in the kids section, and 3 other family or kids coasters, including their new Vekoma family boomerang, Luna. I also enjoyed going up into Leesburg Gillette, the enormous Ferris wheel that overlooks the entire park. On top of all that, they have the best virtual queue system ever. You can have multiple people in your party reserving rides for the whole group at once. That made 2 busy days at Leesburg that much more enjoyable. This is the best international park I've been to, and it's not close. So that's it, all my non-US parks ranked up. Let me know what you think of the list. If you've been to any of these parks, what you think, and let me know your favorite park outside the States. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you're new here and want to see more like this, please give me a sub. Also, check out my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you also happen to love baseball. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.